would be great. Perfect timing. So just letting you know that it's being recorded, but we won't use any of this information or, have any of that. But so we have that shared notes doc. And Marissa, yes, Marissa posted the link to the shared notes doc. So we talked about that, the agenda links in the Q&A section in there. And then again, feel free to interrupt me during the presentations. And a little bit about the agenda. So we'll start with a presentation and then a quick walkthrough of NMDC EDGE. And then we will actually have you guys walk through running some of these workflows in NMDC EDGE and looking at the outputs. And then we'll have some time for questions and then a little bit about how to get engaged with the NMDC if that's something that is of interest to you. So we, like I said, we likely won't go the full 2 hours, but make sure you're keeping your questions in mind so that we can answer all of those. And we will be presenting these bioinformatic workflows that you can immediately go use on your own data. So this isn't something in the future. This is a tool that we have ready for you. So we want to present this in a really practical way of getting you all used to using these standardized bioinformatic workflows on your own data or test data and getting your real feedback on these workflows that you're able to run immediately as you leave this workshop and during this workshop. So with that, so I'm still seeing some people trickle in. So if anyone has any questions as you start to join, then just let me know. And I think Marissa's doing a great job of continuously sharing the shared notes doc. So let's get started. Okay, so this presentation is going to quickly run you guys through a little overview of what the NMDC is for those of you who don't know, and then a little bit about the benefits of standardized bioinformatic workflows. And then after that, a little bit about the specific standardized workflows that the NMDC provides and how you can run those, and a little bit about how to get involved. So with that, we're going to start with the little bit of background on the NMDC, the mission and vision. So NMDC's overall mission is to provide a gateway to fair multi-omics microbiome data, leveraging best practices for data curation and processing. And the overall vision is to empower the research community to harness microbiome data exploration and discovery through a collaborative, integrative data science ecosystem. So the NMDC is focused on microbiome data, as it says in our title, the National Microbiome Data Collaborative, and really focused on metadata standards, just best practices overall for data reuse and data use, and making sure we're incorporating user feedback and community feedback, as well as all of the different viewpoints from the different national labs that are part of this collaborative and anyone else that wants to be a part of the NMDC. And then a little bit about FAIR data. So you might have heard this term before, but FAIR data, the NMDC is really committed to FAIR data principles of making microbiome data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And both raw and processed data should be fair in the eyes of the NMDC. So making sure that people can find this raw data as well as data that might have been processed through some of these bioinformatic workflows. And processing data in a standardized way does make it increasingly interoperable and reusable. So this is where the thought process behind the standardized workflows comes from. And again, a little bit more about standardized bioinformatics workflows. So while improvements to bioinformatic workflows are important for advancing science, the number of resulting microbiome datasets processed with different tools presents challenges for reusability and making cross-study comparisons. So with the never-ending stream of new tools and new parameters that are being introduced, I think we all know that there are so many different ways that you can process data that each have their own benefits, but then having something standardized to process things in a very similar way using best practice tools is really valuable, especially for microbiome data sets. A little bit more about the actual benefits of standardized workflows. So they do help to make data and data products fair. And this can be leading to reproducibility both within a lab and between labs. So I know for us, one specific instance that we had in one of our labs is we had a postdoc who was always performing all of our bioinformatic analyses. And when he decided to leave, there wasn't a great trail of what he had done in terms of the tools he'd used and different parameters that he had used. So we ended up having to redo a lot of the analyses that he had done, which led to a lot of wasted time. So the reproducibility within a lab of just between experiments is really important, and just continuity between experiments and between data sets and between labs is really important too, especially as science becomes increasingly collaborative and we're working with people across the country and across the world. Just being able to have workflows that different groups can point to just process the data in the exact same way is increasingly valuable. And just to better keep track of what was done to data. So metadata standards and sample metadata and process metadata are extremely important for reproducibility, and just knowing what was done to your data is really important. This also allows for integrations and comparisons with other data sets from other studies. So we'll also talk about some of the studies that are in the NMDC data portal, but this allows for other comparisons with other data sets that were run through the same standardized workflows, which can be really important when you're looking at a large data repository or data portal that has a lot of data that has been processed in the same way. And my personal favorite, it's no need to put together your own workflows. So like I said, we all know there's a ton of bioinformatic tools out there. It's really hard to know what the best tools are for certain data types or what to use for your certain sample type. So I prefer not to put together my own bioinformatic workflow, but leveraging existing standardized workflows that you know are using best practice and gold standard tools is something that I find really useful. And existing workflows can already include these best tools for omics data processing. And this saves research, implementation, and testing time. Sorry. I also am sick, if you can't tell, so I need a few water breaks. Okay, so the scale and standardization specifically in microbiome data. So microbiome data, specifically multi-omic microbiome data, provides many opportunities for data reuse, but this can be impossible if data is not collected and processed in a way that is conducive to reuse. So microbiome data and multi-omic microbiome data, they include a lot of different taxa and different things within the microbiome that usually researchers particularly focused on one little group within a microbiome or things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities beyond the scope of one study for microbiome data and what everything else in the microbiome might be doing. So it's kind of the perfect data for data reuse, and it's often not reused. And especially with multi-omic microbiome data, especially if it's not connected, you can't really tell where the metatranscriptome data came from or metaproteome data and how those can be integrated. So having effective metadata and potentially standardized workflows for this microbiome data can directly lead to that data reuse. And the amount of microbiome data being generated continues to rapidly increase. So as more microbiomes are being interrogated with cheaper sequencing costs and other things like that, it's just going to keep increasing. And a lot of the infrastructure surrounding this just cannot keep up. So the microbiome data can also be very large and complex, which leads to its own set of challenges. So microbiome data and multi-omic microbiome data can be really difficult to store, analyze, compute, and transfer. So this can lead to issues with people running bioinformatic analyses on microbiome data and multi-omic data. A little bit more about what I mean when I say multi-omic data. So multi-omics can refer to a lot of different omics. We are talking specifically about genomics and metagenomics, transcriptomics and metatranscriptomics, proteomics and metaproteomics, and metabolomics. And in the context of the microbiome, we're going to be talking about these meta-omics. So multi-omic data collection is rapidly becoming one of the most effective ways to interrogate microbiomes. But like we said, the infrastructure surrounding these data cannot keep up. So this leads to data not being findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and these different omics data not being quite connected enough to allow for effective data reuse. And processing these omics data streams is currently very difficult to do in a way that allows for effective cross-study comparisons and, again, the data reuse. So how are we addressing some of these challenges at the NMDC? So the NMDC addressed these challenges by integrating state-of-the-art open source bioinformatics tools into standardized workflows for processing raw multi-omics data to produce interoperable and reusable annotated data products. So the workflows that are currently offered by the NMDC are, there's several metagenomic data processing workflows. So we have a READS QC, a read-based taxonomy classification, assembly, annotation, and a metagenome assembled genomes, or MAGs. And we also have a metatranscriptome workflow, a natural organic matter workflow, and these are the sets that we're going to be focusing on mainly in this workshop, because these are already implemented into NMDC EDGE, and the ones we're going to be specifically focusing on are the metagenome workflows. But the NMDC also provides a metabolome and a metaproteome workflow. And why the NMDC workflows? So I've talked to you a little bit about how there are so many tools and so many different workflows out there. So what makes these workflows the best workflows for your microbiome data? So the benefits of using these specific workflows, the tools that were incorporated into these workflows were carefully researched, selected, and modified for optimal performance. A lot of them use these really best practice workflows and tools that have been established by different user research groups and different national labs. And the workflows have been extensively tested on data from dozens of institutions, instruments, and sample types. The users are able to run these workflows through shared computing resources. So users don't need to download these tools or databases, nor have access to their own computing clusters. So this can help with some of those bottlenecks that we mentioned for processing microbiome data. And the workflows are offered in a user-friendly interface, which is NMDC EDGE, which we will talk about, for users with any level of bioinformatics experience. And all of these tools, like I said, are open source. So all of the tools, the workflows, and the results are open source, and that's something that the NMDC is committed to. And then I will give a little overview of this in the second half of this workshop, but the NMDC has a data discovery portal. So the data in the NMDC data discovery portal has been run through the NMDC standardized omics workflows. So when you look through the data on this portal, which I'll show you, you can actually find the results from these workflows, and then you're able to directly compare your data with data in the data portal, which is extremely useful. And running your own data through these same workflows, yeah, like I said, allows for these direct comparisons, and there are thousands of data sets in the NMDC portal, and we're continuously adding more data sets. So now we're going to get into some of the more specifics about the actual workflows. So this is a figure of the metagenomic workflows that the NMDC offers. So in the blue, these blue boxes are the actual workflows, and this is how they connect to each other. So on an NMDC EDGE, you'll see that you can run the full metagenomic pipeline starting from one input file, but you can also run these workflows separately if you have the proper input files for each step. So you can see how this leads from your raw Illumina data for the metagenomic workflows into the READS QC, which you can then go into your read-based taxonomy classification, assembly, annotation, and your metagenome assembled genomes. And this just gives you a little bit of information about the file types needed for each step. The READS QC workflow, so also, like I said, there are several NMDC EDGE and LANL workflow developers on the call. So if you have more specific questions that are more in depth than I am able to answer, they would be happy to answer those questions for you too. So feel free to put them in the chat or into the shared notes doc. So they can answer any questions about the specific tools that these are using, any of the parameters that are being chosen, anything like that. So we have all of that specific information also in the extensive documentation. So the READS QC, I'll give you guys just a little bit of a brief introduction to each workflow, and then you can ask more in-depth questions, or we can talk more in depth later. So I see a question in the chat. So this is currently only for Illumina reads at the moment. And I don't know if anyone, so all of the workflows have been developed for Illumina specific reads for the metagenomic and metatranscriptomic pipelines, I believe. But if anyone else from the LANL team has an answer to if we're going to be developing anything for some of the long read platforms, feel free to put that in the chat. So the READS QC workflow, it performs quality control on raw metagenome Illumina reads to trim or filter low quality data and to remove artifacts, linkers, adapters, spike in reads, and reads mapping to several hosts and common microbial contaminants. So your input for the READS QC is going to be that raw Illumina data, and the output is going to be your file of the cleaned reads and QC statistics, and this output file will be the input for several downstream NMDC workflows. And each of these workflows, we have a little bit of a little figure at the bottom that can hopefully help you understand the tools and the inputs and the outputs coming from these workflows. So then we have the read-based taxonomy classification. So this workflow takes in Illumina sequencing files and profiles the reads using 3 taxonomic classification tools, Gotcha2, Kraken2, and Centrifuge, with a range of sensitivity and specificity between these 3 tools. The input, again, is going to be your Illumina data, and it is highly recommended to input your cleaned reads from the reads QC workflow. And the output from here is going to be the results for each tool at 3 taxonomic levels. So your species, genus, and family in NMDC EDGE. And you also get your interactive chronoplots that are also generated, and your relevant TSV or CSV files. You also have your metagenome assembly workflow. So this takes in Illumina data, runs your error correction, assembly, and assembly validation. Your input is going to be Illumina data again, and again, the recommended input is that output from the reads QC workflow. So you really want to try to put in these cleaned reads wherever you can. And the output being the file of assembled contigs and your assembly statistics. And a lot of these, I'm listing the main output files. There are also typically other output files that include other statistics and other metrics. Then you have your metagenome annotation. It takes in assembled metagenomes and generates structural and functional annotations. The input being the assembled contigs, and the recommended input is the output from the metagenome assembly workflow. But if you happen to do your assembly with some other workflow and you have the proper file types for the annotation, you can also put that in here. And the output is your structural annotation file, your functional annotation file, and several summary files. So then we have the metagenome assembled genomes, or MAGS workflow. This classifies contigs into bins. The bins are then refined using the functional annotation file. The bins are evaluated for completeness and contamination, and the quality of the bins is determined and lineage is assigned. So the input for the MAGS workflow is your assembled contigs, the read mapping file from the assembly, and the functional annotation of the assembly. And your output is your summary statistics, and your file of the high quality and medium quality bins is going to be your most useful file. And then these I will kind of briefly walk through. So we're done with the metagenomic workflow. So I'm going to just briefly touch upon the other workflows. So the metatranscriptome and the natural organic matter, the next 2 that I'll talk about, are available in NMDC EDGE. So I'll just talk about them a little bit and I'll show them to you in NMDC EDGE, but I'll just kind of briefly walk through them since we won't be doing any actual hands-on work with these workflows. So the metatranscriptome workflow takes in raw metatranscriptome data, filters the data for quality, removes your ribosomal RNA reads, assembles and annotates the transcripts. And the data is then mapped back to the genomic features in the transcripts, and the RPKMs, and I always forget what this stands for, the reads per kilobase of transcript per million mapped reads, I think, are calculated for each feature in the functional annotation file. And your input, again, your Illumina data from your metatranscriptome sequencing project, and your output would then be your assembled transcripts, annotated features file, annotation files. Okay, again, your natural organic matter workflow is in NMDC EDGE, but we're just going to gloss over this. Takes in your mass spec data collected from organic extracts to determine the molecular formulas of natural organic biomolecules in the input sample. So the input is the output from a mass spec experiment, an FTICR mass spec experiment. And you also take in a calibration file of molecular formula references when running this via command line, but we actually have that implemented into NMDC EDGE. And your output is the primary output is the molecular formula data table. And these I was especially glossed over because these are not yet in NMDC EDGE, but the NMDC does provide a metabolome and a metaproteome workflow. So in the tabolome, the GCMS-based metabolomics workflow leverages PNNL's core MS software framework, and the design allows for the orchestration of the metabolite characterization pipeline, i.e. the signal to noise reduction, the M/Z based chromatogram peak deconvolution, abundance threshold calculation, peak picking, spectral similarity calculation, and molecular search, similarity score calculation, and confidence filtering, all in a single step. So that's quite the mouthful. It'll be great when this is in NMDC EDGE, and this workflow is really great. So the input for this is your raw GCMS data, output metabolites data table. Lastly, we have the metaproteome workflow. So this workflow is an end-to-end data processing workflow for protein identification and characterization using MS data. So it can take in your LCMS, MS data, and an associated metagenome file, So that's important. You need to have your metagenome file, and the output being your protein crosstab and your QC plots as the main outputs. Okay, I'm just gonna check the chat for any questions here. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Ben, for answering that question. Okay, so we're coming now to NMDC EDGE specifically, and other ways of running the NMDC workflows. So they're all available in a command line interface, so they can be run via command line, and links to the Docker Hub and GitHub information are in the last slide. And the workflows can be run in a user-friendly interface, NMDC EDGE, which we're going to be specifically talking about today, which again is one of my favorite things because it's designed to accommodate bioinformaticians at every level of expertise, including novices. So especially when I started at LANL, I was 100% a novice. So having something like this was really helpful to me. And even now that I know more about it, it just makes life easier of having a point and click way of running bioinformatic workflows, especially for microbiome data. So we have links here, and there are links at the end of the slideshow, as well as in the shared notes doc to actual NMDC EDGE, which we will get to. And the workflows will be added to KBase as well. So for those of you who use KBase, they will be in there along with a lot of the NMDC data. In the future of the NMDC workflows, so we would love to implement some automation to enable linking with NMDC data submission and the data discovery portal. And for the future of NMDC EDGE, we're going to add the metaproteome and metabolome workflows. And we're currently beta testing all of these workflows in NMDC EDGE. So some of these workflows have already been pretty extensively beta tested, but we kind of have an ongoing call for beta testers to make sure the workflows are continuously improving and the NMDC EDGE interface is continuously improving. And then, like we said, adding all the NMDC workflows to KBase. And there's also kind of a question mark of what is the future that you all want to see for the NMDC workflows? Are there different changes that you would want to see? Are there different tools that you would want to incorporate? Are there different ways of visualizing the results? Are there different tables you'd like to see in NMDC EDGE? Anything like that. The NMDC is really committed to this really community-driven approach. So the future of the NMDC workflows is kind of the future that you all want it to be. So we have a lot of these future plans and things we want to see, but we really want to incorporate as much of the user feedback as possible. So a little bit more about the beta testing. So we're actively recruiting beta testers to help us test and provide feedback on running the workflows in NMDC EDGE, the NMDC EDGE user interface, the NMDC EDGE, or just the NMDC workflow training materials in general. If you're interested in becoming a beta tester, you can email this email here, and we will give you a beta tester credit on the NMDC EDGE site. So we want to give people as much credit as possible for the work they've put in for beta testing. So it's really just testing things out, seeing what breaks, seeing what you can run, seeing what you can't run, and sending us your feedback. And we have a feedback form in the shared notes doc that we would also love to have you fill out, but it's really just gathering people's experiences with using this site. So from our first round of beta tester feedback, just to show you how seriously we take this, we implemented about 80%, I think a little bit over 80% at this point, actually, of the results that we got. And 15% we were working to implement for the suggestions at the point that I made this graph. And only about 4% where we really couldn't implement those suggestions. And it wasn't, we decided not to, it was just we could not. So we really do take your feedback very seriously, and we implement as much of the feedback as possible. So you're really helping to shape a resource that can be as useful as possible to you and your research community. So getting involved with the NMDC and the NMDC workflows, again, providing us with feedback will help us to make the NMDC more useful to you and your specific data. You can sign up for our newsletter or find us on Twitter in this little box here to get the most up-to-date information on the NMDC workflows and the NMDC in general. You can attend the NMDC community conversations and other webinars and workshops that we might offer. You can apply to be an NMDC champion. I think there are a few champions in here now, but there's on the website, you can find a link to become an NMDC champion. And any overall questions about the NMDC, you can email them here. And you can just see that we do have this strategy of just continuous engagement with our community and implementing that back into our resources. We have a couple relevant publications that we wanted to point out in case anyone is curious about the NMDC. And then Bin, who is on this call, he first authored this recent publication for challenges in bioinformatics workflows for processing microbiome omics data at scale, which is very relevant to this particular workshop. So I'd recommend checking that one out specifically. And here's some relevant links. Again, a lot of these are in the shared notes doc, but in case anyone wanted to quickly screenshot this or for the recording, if anyone needs these links, they're in here as well. But please, if you want to reach out with any ways of getting involved, any additional questions, if you want to be a beta tester, we welcome that. So let me just exit out of this. Okay, I can also, so I'm just going to go through the chat really quickly. So I think there are plans for an LCMS. Oh, Ben also answered that one, perfect. And I will also be sharing the slides. I think that is totally doable. And thank you, Marissa, for pasting that paper. Okay, so any other questions about this first set of slides? Perfect. Okay. If there are any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the shared notes doc as well. I'm not checking the shared notes doc as frequently, so Marissa, feel free to interrupt me if there's anything that I'm missing there. But I'm going to now give a brief walkthrough of NMDC EDGE, and I'm actually going to log into my account before I start sharing. And this is also going to be the most amount of people you've ever had on the NMDC EDGE site. So it'll be interesting to see how the site holds up. Okay, so next we're going to give you a brief walkthrough of the NMDC EDGE interface and the site before we let you all loose running your own workflows in the second half of this workshop. So to give you a brief overview, this is the NMDC EDGE homepage. So the link to get there should again be in the shared notes doc or in the chat or in probably 1,000 different places that I've talked about. So basically, this site takes what we have created before at LANL, which is this EDGE bioinformatics platform, and there's a link here to that. So that platform was created as a way to make bioinformatics accessible to all, so making anyone able to run these best practice workflows. And EDGE bioinformatics is much more customizable and modular for people to adjust their own parameters and things like that. And we've also developed an EDGE COVID-19 platform. So it's become more of a platform that is able to be, I guess, repurposed for these different bioinformatic needs. So we have the regular EDGE bioinformatics, we have EDGE COVID-19, and we have NMDC EDGE. So this homepage has links to different things that you might be interested in. So there's the EDGE bioinformatics link, a quick start guide, there's a link to the documentation, and then more information about beta testing as well. So if you come here, you can get to our feedback form and our support email as well. So I want to point out a few nice things about this website. So if you're not already logged in, it will prompt you to log in. And once you're logged in, you'll see your little icon in this corner. And from this little menu, you can look at some of your projects, the job queue, which there are also buttons for over here. And you can, one of the most important things from this little menu is you can upload your files and manage your uploads from here. So there's another button over on the left-hand side for uploading files, but your managing uploads is over here, which we'll walk you through as well. And I do have some admin tools since this is an admin account, so just ignore those unless you plan to be an admin here. Okay, so let me actually minimize this so that I can get to this button. So one of the most important buttons that I use a million times when I'm on the site is the My Projects button. So this will take you to all the projects that you have currently running or you've already run. So you can start by selecting which columns you want to actually show up for your runs. So I am terrible about creating unique project names. So I name, as you can see, my projects all have essentially the same name, which is a terrible habit that I don't recommend to anyone. But you can select to add your description as part of your columns, which can be really useful since I tend to try to make those more descriptive. And then you can also, if you don't just want your own projects, but you want to show all the projects available to you. So these are ones that have been shared with you or have been shared publicly, I believe. You can select that button as well. You can also refresh your data here. So this is really useful if you have projects that are actively running. And if you're also like me and you're impatient, and you want to check your data right when it's done, refreshing that can help you see when the status is updated from in the queue to running to complete. So you can also see all of your projects listed down here. And if you drill down on any of these, you can see the description, any information about how it was shared or other information about that specific project. You can see when it was created and updated and different actions. So you can edit your projects here. You can also do different things like selecting these different projects. And then from here, you can either delete all of these selected projects. You can share the selected projects, unshare, publish them. So this is to anyone with an NMDC EDGE account. You can actually publish some of your projects to make them public here. And then you can unpublish some of them as well. And so the sharing selected projects, if, for example, I wanted to share these projects just with Karen, who's on the call. So she has an NMDC EDGE account. So you can put in her account information and just share your projects between different collaborators there, which is actually an extremely useful tool that we use all the time. And if you want to, from this My Projects window, you can also get to your results for a specific project. So if you press this button here, it'll say go to project result page. And it will take you to your results. And we will look at these result pages in more detail when we go through some of the test data, but I just wanted to show you, this is a result page for just running one of the workflows specifically, so not the entire metagenomic pipeline, but just the read-based taxonomy classification. So the results will include a bit of a summary here. So your description, the owner, the submission time, your status, which workflow was run. And then this general section will take you through which workflow was run, the start time, the run time. And then this is a really useful feature. Sometimes I do forget which input file I put in. So if you scroll through this project configuration, you can get to which exact input file you put in here as well. Then you can scroll through. So for each of the workflows, it'll have something like read-based taxonomy classification result or metagenome assembly result, whatever it was for the specific workflow. And it'll give you usually a summary table. So in this instance, this is the read-based taxonomy classification workflow. So for each of the three classification tools, it gives me the classified reads, the species reads, the number of species that were identified, different summaries here. You have your taxonomy top 10 at the species, genus, and family levels for each of these three different tools. And it's really easy to look at kind of the differences between these tools as well. So for instance, Gotcha2 is the most specific tool of the three. So if Gotcha2 says something is in there, it's probably in there. But it's really nice to be able to look at each of these three tools and compare between them. And we recommend running all three of these. I think for the workflow, you're able to select 1 to 3 of these, but we always recommend running all three. So in this detail section, you can also see more about the taxonomy that was called by each of these tools, and you get your interactive chronoplot here as well. So it's interactive here, and you can actually open it in its own window as well. And so there's usually this whole section for the specific workflow, and then there's a section about the download outputs. So for the read-based analysis, it's classified into the 3 different tools. So for Gotcha2, for example, you could then download that chronoplot as well as your taxonomy information. So that's a little bit about the My Projects window and the results. You can also always go to the job queue button here. So this is anything that's actively running on NMDC EDGE will show up in the job queue, the link here. So it is really useful to know what is being run. So if you are wondering why your project is taking so long to run, you can look at this job queue to see, oh, wow, there's a lot in the queue. And that's when you email us and say, this is really important. Can you push this up in the queue? I'm kidding, but also not really. You can do that if you really need something run. But this is really useful for knowing what is running, what is processing, what is in the queue for your own projects as well. So those are kind of those buttons up here. You can always get back to the homepage here. One of the links that is near and dear to my heart is the tutorial section. So this is where you can find out more information about how to run each of these specific workflows and the pipelines. So these are training materials that the NMDC has developed for NMDC EDGE specifically and the workflows. So if you click anything in this column, it's going to be tutorial videos. So if I click this, hopefully it doesn't start playing. So this actually will run through pretty much the information that I'm giving you now about the basics of NMDC EDGE and your account navigation and data upload. And then there are also video tutorials for each of the workflows specifically. So if you're running a workflow and you run into any issues, I would recommend looking at these tutorials first. We also have PDF versions here because these will get into more specifics about the actual file types that are allowed for inputs, which is a common error, and other things like that. So hopefully these tutorials can help answer some of your questions. We also have some of the command line information linked here as well, but recommend that you take a look at some of these training materials, and it can be really useful to have the video and the PDF versions for different learning types. And then we also, for some of the beta tester feedback, we also ask some questions about the tutorial information to make sure that we have enough covered with the tutorials. Next, you can go to public projects, which we will have you guys go to next. I guess I can go back into full screen so you don't have to see all the tabs I have open. But so the public projects have been shared publicly. So I just shared these ones publicly with all of you. These are individual workflow runs that were run, so you can feel free to explore anything in the public projects and any of the results there. And Mark, who I want to give a huge shout out to for being amazing, along with Mihal and everyone else over the weekend who helped to make sure all the test data was run. There are 4 new test data sets that we really wanted in there that are actually data from the NMDC portal that you are welcome to explore, that we'll talk about kind of the different microbiomes that have been run by the NMDC and the variety that can be run with these workflows. And we have these as examples for all of you. The upload files button accomplishes basically what you think it will. So the manage uploads button is still you can only get to it by coming to your user icon for the manage uploads. But for the upload files, so the only thing I wanted to point out here is that the maximum file size right now is 10 gigs, and the max server storage right now is 150, but that just means files will be kept for about 180 days. So the results from your workflows, I believe, will never be deleted, but your input files will be after 180 days, just to save space. So if you have a file size over 10 gigs, let us know and we can potentially help to work something out. But that's our current limit. And we just have a list of the allowable file extensions that you can upload at this point. And then a quick run through of running the actual workflows in this interface. So you can select through these different categories to get to the different types of workflows. So since we're going to be specifically focusing on the metagenomics, I'll just focus here. So you can select run a single workflow if you want to run a single workflow. So I'll just run a test to show you how to do this here. But basically put in project or run name. And again, probably want something more specific than what I'm going to put in for mine, but this is how you can put in your information, and then you select which workflow you want to run. It will give you a little bit of information here. Then you select your input file. So this gives you a little bit of information. If your raw reads are interleaved or not, you just select yes or no. And then you can add multiple files, but I'm just going to do the one. And I'm going to run this quickly on a test mock community data set that we have before. So I just want to walk you through how to set up a run and how easy it is. It's really 5 clicks perhaps. And then everything is in there, you hit submit. So now it's going to, you've got a green pop-up box at the top. So it is now submitted, it's in the queue, and this takes you to your My Projects window. So that's really how easy it is to run any of these workflows in NMDC EDGE, and it's running these best practice tools and workflows in the background. And then we'll walk through this in the second half, but this is just how you run through the whole metaG pipeline, essentially the same thing, but you can just choose which workflows you want to have on and off. Okay. So I think that was it for the first half of this. And we have everyone scheduled for a 5-minute break if they need it, but I will also give people a chance for questions right now.
Hi, Julie, I have a question. So I was wondering if, can you, it seems like you can upload the files, the omics files like transcriptomics, genomics, and you upload separately, but can you analyze all of them all together combined? I don't know if I missed it, sorry. Like,
yeah, good question.
Like, for example, you have a genome and you did transcriptomics, and you did metabolomics. Can you analyze those together somehow?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you have to analyze them separately with the different workflows. So you have to input the data separately and run them in different workflows. But then when they're put into the NMDC data portal, if so eventually the NMDC data portal will take in data from everyone. And once that happens, in the data portal, it will kind of integrate the data. So everything will be linked to the same sample. And then you can integrate the data from there of having the different omics types linked with the same biosample. But you can't run things in an integrative way through the workflows at the moment. It's still unique uploads and unique workflow runs. And Ben or anyone, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah, for the question. Any other questions? Okay, do we want to do maybe like a 3-minute break as we prepare for the second half? Because I think we can crank through the second half very quickly. Okay, I see 1 thumbs up, and I'm going to take that and run with it. So let's do like a 3-ish minute break, maybe 4 until 2:55. And then we all get to run things ourselves. So the second half is the fun half where it's all hands-on and you don't have to listen to me lecture anymore. Okay, if everyone can be back here 2:55, then we're golden. Okay, it is 2:55 Mountain Time, 1:55 Pacific, 4:55 Eastern. Okay, so I'm going to, I think Marissa did already post the link to NMDC EDGE, but I'm just going to put it again. So the second half of the workshop, we want to be super interactive, and we really want as much real-time feedback as possible and for you guys to try this out yourselves. So I want to walk you guys through what we want you to do. And like I said, we have never had this many people on the site or running workflows at the same time. So this is a really great test for us. So we're really grateful to all of you for being here and being willing to do this. So let me just share my screen again here. Okay, so what we would love to have you guys do is follow that link to get to NMDC EDGE. And then we're going to go into the metagenomics and the run multiple workflows. So actually you can do run a single workflow or run multiple workflows if you want. So this is also, I put in the meeting invite that you can use your ORCID information to log in. So you do need an account in order to run any of the workflows. So I'll give people a few minutes. You can either use your ORCID information, which I know is usually easiest, or you can create an NMDC EDGE account just with your email. But you do need that in order to run anything. So I can give people a few minutes there, and I'll just walk you through some of the test data sets that we have that you can pull from. So again, huge thank you to Mark and Michal and Jan and everyone else for pulling these data sets. So let me give you guys an example here. So when you go to upload your data on NMDC EDGE, you have several different options. So you have your uploads. So this is your own personal uploads or uploads that have been shared publicly. You have your public data that has been put into these different folders, mainly this test data folder, and you have your projects. So the projects is actually really useful when you're running multiple workflows one after the other. Especially for when you're running a single workflow. So the projects actually pulls your own project outputs through, which is extremely helpful, at least for me. So if you run a reads QC workflow, it will then pull that output through so that you can then use that output as the input for subsequent workflows. So you can see here, if I wanted this specific run, I can come through it, and these are my cleaned reads from the reads QC output. So this I can put directly into an assembly workflow or a read-based taxonomy classification workflow. So that's really useful to use. So that's under the projects window. And I think some other people's, so Mark's projects have also been shared publicly here. So this public data, some test data sets that you guys are welcome to use. Anything here you're welcome to use. So just to point out a couple specifically, so this SRR 7877884, these are mock communities. So this is a full mock community that we have used for test data, and this is a 10% version of that. So randomly sampled 10%, just to give it a smaller footprint on the NMDC EDGE site that we've just been running tests through. So those are some good ones if you want to choose any of those. We have some other test data files in here as well. But the ones that I want you guys to focus on specifically are in the uploads folder, and it's under Mark. I'm sorry, everyone's seeing your email here, but under Mark's email, under the upload section, you can see these 4 microbiome data sets. So these are ones that I pulled specifically from the NMDC data portal, which is the last tutorial that we'll kind of walk through in this workshop, is how to navigate the NMDC data portal. But so I pulled 4 unique microbiomes that, based off of some of your backgrounds that I know of, thought would be interesting to each of you. Not the entire group of you, but I know some of you that we reached out to specifically do a lot of rhizosphere science, for example, or some soil metagenomics. And being in New Mexico, I know we have a lot of sand, so thought we would include that one as well. And then we have a couple of different soil samples to potentially compare as well. So some of these are 10% data sets. And then I think this one, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this one was too small to subset, but these ones I think we did subset. So these are the 4 that I'd recommend choosing from. So you can select one of these, for example, and then we can walk through, sorry, just checking the chat. The selected file prompt. Yes, perfect. Okay, so if you go to the run multiple workflows, the run a single workflow. So I jumped ahead a little bit to this this pop-up box, but so it's this little button here to the right of the interleaved FASTQ number 1. This will give you this prompt. So normally you can add, I'll just do a pipeline test. This is a test. So I'll just go through in order. So I added a project or run name. So for this, we can walk through each of these steps specifically. I want to just point out those input files, but now that I think people have had a chance to register for an account, we can go through all of these steps. So the project or run name, I believe you can't have any spaces in here. And you want to make this pretty short. I think there's a character limit on here as well. So this you want to be pretty short and to the point with no spaces. And then your description, you can go crazy with as many spaces as you want and make this much more descriptive of your actual input files and what you're trying to get out of this or your project information. So if you know your raw reads, if they're interleaved or not, you would select yes or no. I believe all of the data sets that we would be using here for test data are interleaved. So you can leave that as a yes. And then if you have, for example, if you have 2 uninterleaved files, if you have 2 FASTQs, you can use that add button to have your read 1 and your read 2 put in there. So then here's where you can again select this button, which gets you to your file finder. And then again, we can just go through here, and the ones I would like you guys to focus on are under the uploads and under MC Flynn's email. And there are these 4 microbiome data sets. And then from there, if you're running this run multiple workflows section again, so you have all of the different NMDC metagenomic workflows here to choose from. So you can turn things on and off, but you have to be mindful of the dependencies. So if you, for example, turn off metagenome assembly, then you cannot run metagenome annotation or metagenome mags because those rely on the output of the metagenome assembly workflow. So just be mindful that if you do turn any of those off, that it might then turn these off for a reason. But then you could turn off read-based taxonomy classification and it doesn't affect any downstream workflows. So for the purposes of this, I'd recommend potentially trying to run as many of these as you would like to or that you're interested in. So I mentioned this a little bit before, but you can take away some of these read-based taxonomy classification tools if you just want to run one, for example. I always recommend everyone to run all 3 of them to get that nice range of the sensitive and specific tools. So I'd recommend running all 3 of those. And then for the metagenome mags file, you do have an input map file that is optional. So you don't need to put any of those in. So you can see how easy it is to, you really don't have to do much except for make sure things are turned on or off that you want to be turned on or off and that you select a file. And then you can either reset if you want to redo everything or you can hit submit. So I'm going to hit submit. It was submitted successfully. So now you can see back in my projects window. So the one I submitted earlier is running and this one I just submitted is in the queue. So let me check the job queue, see what everyone's doing. Looks like a lot has been submitted recently, which is fantastic. So let me just stop sharing for a second to get a bit of feedback here. So if people have started a workflow, can you give me a thumbs up or your other favorite emoji if anyone has run a workflow? Awesome. Great. Perfect. And nothing has broken. This is awesome. Okay, great. And if you have already submitted something for the full pipeline, I also invite you to potentially put something through one of the run the individual workflows. We also have test data for the metatranscriptome and the natural organic matter if you're interested in those as well. But I will give people another maybe 10 minutes to explore and potentially run some of the other individual workflows or explore some of the other options there. So I'll just give till 3:15, and in that time I will walk through running a couple of the individual workflows on my screen. And I will run through a single metatranscriptome workflow. And if you select any of these learn more links, I think it will take you to the GitHub account or the documentation. I think it's the GitHub account if you need any more information about the specific tools or the parameters that each of the workflows are using. Okay, it looks like a lot of jobs have been submitted. So I'm just going to give another 3 minutes for submitting jobs, and then we can go through some of the output files since it looks like everyone is, or a lot of people have gone through the starting of the workflows. Any questions? Great. Okay, 2 more minutes. So I see a question in the chat of, do we need to change any of the settings for sharing for you to see our workflows? Or are you seeing them all no matter what, shared versus public? Yeah, good question. So I believe everyone's able to see anything that's running in the job queue button, but to see the actual results of the workflows, since I'm an admin, I probably have a way of finding everyone's projects, but for everyone to see everything, if you publish it to make it public, then everyone can see it. And if you share it specifically with me or another person, then only those people can see it. Plus, the admins if we go in to kill a job or something like that. So the shared is for individual users that you want to share your project with. And the publishing to make it public, all users can see that. And the job queue button, anyone can see anything that's running. It's a great question. And that will actually lead us to our next section. Okay, so it is 10 after. So now I want to quickly run through how to look at the different results. So I showed you the results from one of the read-based taxonomy classification projects, but I wanted to quickly run through interpreting and looking at the results from a full metagenome pipeline project. So we're doing this kind of cooking show style. So Karen Davenport, who's on the call, that's her favorite term for these things. So I'm stealing that from her. But so if you started your project, so we can't wait for everyone's projects to finish since everyone submitted them at the same time. It would take a very long time for everyone's projects to finish up, and we can't do that within the time frame of this workshop. So if you chose one of those 4 microbiome data sets, we actually have all of those run in the public projects folder. So you can go in. So for example, if you chose the populous rhizosphere, you can go in and go to the project result page here. So then you can see, maybe not that one. Sorry. You can go through and see this one, the results from these as if it were your own output. So I'll walk through this one specifically, but anyone can feel free to walk through the results on their own for the public project for the input data that you chose for your own runs. So for the metagenomic pipeline, something that's really useful as opposed to running things separately is it will run it end to end without you having to download and re-upload any sort of new output files or input files. You don't have to keep checking it. It just runs everything for you, and then it collates all of your results into this nice page right here. So everything is right here that you need. So again, you have your general outputs, your general information about your run. So it'll tell you all of the different workflows that were run for this. So if you didn't remember, if you turned off metagenome mags, this will tell you what was actually run and the status, the runtime, start and end time, things like that. Again, for your project configuration, always helpful to come through and see what you put in for your original file, and then what it was using for each of these, and a little bit of the parameters that were used for these. So the fact that each of these workflows was turned on, you can see that here. You can look at which analysis tools were selected and things like that from this general section. You can scroll down to your reads QC result. So you can see here from this input file, again, always nice that they include this here. So thank you to the NMDC EDGE development team for this. You get your result tables for a lot of these different workflows. So your reads QC results are summarized here. So you get your input reads, your input bases, and then you get your outputs of your cleaned reads and your cleaned bases, along with a lot of your other statistics and metrics from each of the workflows. So a lot of these, you'll have kind of your main output statistics, and then we have a lot of other supplementary ones too that are interesting to some of our users. But one of the things that we would love your feedback on is what information you would like to see in these tables, what you think should be highlighted, what you think should be potentially excluded, or other metrics or statistics that you would like to see from these outputs, along with any other visualizations that you would like to see. So we do have plans for implementing some additional visualization tools, but anything that you would like to see specifically, that is definitely a point that we would love to hear from you. So again, for the read-based taxonomy classification, you get your results here, a lot of Pseudomonas in this sample, and then you can click around for the different detailed results at different taxonomic levels, your interactive chronoplots, and then you get to your metagenome assembly results. So here, your most important ones are going to be your assembly contigs and scaffolds, and then you have a lot of assembly metrics here as well. Your metagenome annotation, where you have your sequences with genes, sequences without genes, your predicted gene statistics, and all of this information as well. And all of the information that's summarized in these tables are also available in your downloadable output files. So it's not like you have to take the information directly from here. You can download these results, but these are just nice ways of quickly visualizing your results for a lot of these statistics. Your metagenome mags, so you also have your bin contigs number here. And then here you can directly see the bin quality here, which I think is nice too in this table. So for these different bins, the number of contigs that went into each bin, your completeness, and then the gene count. And here, the bin quality. So the high quality and medium quality bins are the ones that are going to go into that HQ and MQ output file, which is probably going to be the file that you'll download. So I like having this because it's rare that you get a lot of high quality bins. So I like visualizing my high quality bins in this table too. And you can couple those with the medium quality bins. So those are kind of the general results for each of the workflows. And then for this download outputs section at the bottom, you can then click through each of these workflows specifically to then download the output files of interest to you. So there's a heck of a lot of downloadable output files. And in the tutorials, we highlight which of them are probably your main output files that you want to focus on for certain things. Or we kind of tell you where to go to find more information about what is in these files. So the documentation that we have for each of these workflows describes what each of these files are. And then we also do, like I said before, that we point out which files are probably the most useful for if you're just doing a basic assembly or something like that, and you just want to pull out your contigs. So that is kind of an overview of your outputs for a MetaG pipeline. We also have test projects in there that we've shared publicly for each of the individual workflows, as well as the metatranscriptomic and the natural organic matter. So if you are so inclined, feel free to explore anything that we've shared publicly. And especially if you want to try out these different 4 microbiome data sets. I know we have 2 soil data sets in there. If you want to compare those or compare with your own data, feel free to run those, compare with anything that you have. And that's an overview of that section. So we are doing really well on time, and we have only 2 other little things that we want to go over really quickly. But any questions? Excellent. Okay. Now let's go over the data portal really quickly. Okay, so really quickly before we go into our last round of questions, and I promised you guys I would end early, so I'm hoping to fulfill that promise by hoping to end halfway through the hour. But so wanted to give you a brief overview. So I keep talking about this NMDC data discovery portal, but I have not yet showed it to you. So I wanted to give you a really brief overview of this data portal. And this isn't quite the scope of this workshop, but it does directly relate to the NMDC data, the NMDC workflows, and just the NMDC in general, what we can provide for you. So this is the NMDC data discovery portal. I believe this is also in the shared notes doc, but Marissa, please correct me if I'm wrong, and or correct that if I did not put that in there. I'm so sorry. So there are links out from here to different the documentation, the NMDC homepage. The beta version of the submission portal is also up. Again, you can also use your ORCID information to log in here. Perfect, thank you, Marissa. So this is just a super brief overview of the NMDC data portal. So you can see that we have data from all of these different omics types. And this is a really interactive portal too. So this is part of our commitment to fair data. So this is really a way of making the data findable by making all of these fields and terms searchable, accessible by making everything open here, interoperable by using these different standardized workflows for people to process things in different or in the same way and in different ways from there, and then reusable by making the data findable, accessible, and interoperable. Researchers are able to effectively reuse this data that's already been generated. So we, in the future, when we start accepting data from anyone into this portal, we would love your data. And then you can also already reuse any of the data that's already in this portal. So feel free to explore this portal as much as you want, download the data, process the data, look for any commonalities in the data, publish on the data, anything you want to do. This is all open. So this is really nice in terms of being able to navigate through the portal to find omics data sets of interest. So you can click through, for example, if I want to look at metagenomes from, say, Colorado, I can zoom in the map here, select here, search this region, select metagenome. I can drag my time scale to make it between these dates. You can do all sorts of different search queries in this portal. So you can also see all of these different terms that you can search by. Some of these important ones are by these extensive metadata fields that the NMDC curates. So we have these gold classification terms. So the data sets that I provided to you in NMDC EDGE, you can probably search through here to try to find similar data sets. So for example, the ones that were from sand, you can probably search through some of these to find other sand data sets as well. So I invite you to take your results from NMDC EDGE and see what you can do with the portal as well. But one thing I wanted to point out specifically, so once you do your different search queries here, I guess search queries is a bit redundant. So your active query terms, you add those here. You get the studies that encompass those search query terms. And then you get your samples here. So what I wanted to really point out is when you get down to the samples that you're interested in, you can then drill down on each of these omics types and you get all of the standardized workflow results. So if you select metagenome here, you can see, so all of those workflows that we just had you run, it's the same thing that you're seeing here. So you can compare any of your data with any of the data in the NMDC portal, knowing that you ran the exact same workflow. So you're able to download any of these output files. And for each of these, so you can do it with the metatranscriptome, your natural organic matter, your metagenome, all of these different results. There's multiple pages of results oftentimes. So you can have, again, your read-based taxonomy classification if you want to compare, for example, what taxa are found in a soil sample in Colorado from the NMDC data portal versus your own soil sample from Colorado from 2017 or something like that. So it's really nice to be able to do some of these comparisons. And there's also this really great new feature of a bulk download. So you can actually bulk download from your down selected data, for example, all reads QC analysis output files, and then you can do it from there. So extremely useful to be able to bulk download. I know that's a pain point for a lot of other data portals or data repositories. So it's really nice having this bulk download feature, as well as being able to download each of these files specifically. So that is the little bit about the NMDC data portal. And I think I only have one last slide for everyone. Yeah, and this is just to reiterate. So we really did do well with time. So this is just to reiterate ways of getting involved with the NMDC. So everything that you saw today is available to you now and in the future. So you are welcome to use these tools as much as you want and share them with anyone that you want. These are completely open, and we want as many users and diverse users as possible. So again, if you're interested in becoming a beta tester for NMDC EDGE, you can email that email there. You can sign up for our newsletter, which is extremely informative for just keeping up to date on the NMDC. Find us on Twitter to get the most up-to-date information about anything NMDC related. You can attend the monthly NMDC community conversations that Marissa helps to host. So that those are always phenomenal to just hear what's happening in the industry and get different perspectives. And you can also apply to be an NMDC champion again, and any other questions, feel free to contact us. So that is all of the content that I had for today, and I wanted to leave enough time for questions, concerns, specific questions, general questions, anything that you guys want to discuss or talk about or add anything to, or anything at all. Wanted to leave these last few minutes open for discussion. Okay, so because no one asked a question, that means that we have to put the post workshop survey in the chat for everyone to fill out, unfortunately. So we have a post workshop survey, and it is now post workshop time. So we would love to have all of you fill out the post workshop survey, since, like I said, this is the first time that we're hosting this, and this is a very pilot version of this workshop. So we want to gather as much feedback as humanly possible. So we invite you to fill out the post-workshop survey now while you're here, in case you have any other questions or have anything you want to directly send to us over chat or in the notes doc, or just by speaking up. We made this not a webinar format, but as an actual meeting, so that we can talk to each other and gather feedback that way as well. So we would love to have you fill out the survey. And if anyone has any questions, and it is a very, very short survey, I promise. There's only 10 questions. They're very easy. We're not tracking your emails or anything. So feel free to be honest. Should probably take you 2 minutes, maybe 3 if you take your time. But so that we should finish at the half-hour mark. I see a hand. Jonathan?
Hi, Julia. Yeah, and this might be tangential because I know the focus is definitely the GUI portal, but I was curious if there was any like API approach to access and use these resources, if somebody say wanted to do leverage things more in a more programmatic way.
Yes, potentially. And I will pass this question off to Ben, or anyone else that can help Ben answer that question. So potentially, yes, but at the moment, not sure.
Hi, this is Ben. So if you really want to run the workflow programmatically, the best way so far is perhaps to download the workflow and run it in the containers you have. And we do plan to authorize a few registered sites to run the workflows through the resources we have, but that will be to the participation sites like Nano or PNL or other registered data processing sites. So unless you want to provide your resource for other people to use, I would recommend you to go with the image download and run the workflows in your own sites. Then you can still do whatever programmatic workflow execution you like.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Ben. Any other last minute questions in the last minute? Great. I wanted to thank all of you for being our guinea pigs for this workshop, and we really appreciate all of you coming here, each and every one of you, for just being here, testing out these workflows. It's really important for us to just have as many diverse users and diverse feedback as possible. So we just really wanted to thank all of you for taking this time on a Monday afternoon to help us out, and hopefully we can help you out by providing these workflows to you and making them as useful to you in your science as possible. So just wanted to thank all of you, and I hope to see you all involved with NMDC in the future. And yeah, thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate it. So have a good rest of your Monday. Thanks, everyone.